The Empire was old. It had conquered 3 galaxies and ruled over 100 different species. At the heart of this great empire sat Empress, a being of terrible power and cold beauty. Her skin was pale blue, and her body glowed with the bioelectric field that all nobility possessed. This glow was their birthright. It marked them as rulers. It made them strong. When her youngest daughter was born, the entire empire celebrated, but the celebration did not last long. The child named was different. She was small and weak. Her body produced no glow. The doctors examined her and found a rare defect in her genes. She would never be like other. She would never have their power. The Empress looked at her newborn daughter and felt nothing but shame. In the Empire, weakness was the greatest sin. A princess without power was not a princess at all. She was a mistake. For the first few years they kept hidden. The public never saw her. Her sisters pretended she did not exist. Then when she was old enough to understand that she was unwanted, they sent her away. A small mining station on the edge of known space became her new home. It was cold and gray and forgotten, just like her. Lived there with only service drones for company. Ships came sometimes to collect the ore that the station mined from nearby asteroids. The crews never spoke to her. They had been ordered not to. She was meant to be forgotten, and so she was. Years passed, grew from a child into a young woman. She learned to read from old data files. She learned about the empire that had thrown her away. She learned about the many species that served and about the few that had tried to resist. One species interested her most. They were called humans. They came from a small planet called Earth, in a system so far away that most had never heard of it. When the Empire first found them, everyone expected an easy conquest. Humans were small and soft. They had no natural weapons, no special powers. Their technology was primitive. But the humans did not surrender. The war lasted 10 years. They won every battle, destroyed every fleet, burned every colony. And still the humans fought. They fought with broken ships and homemade weapons. They fought when they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They fought until they decided that killing them all would cost too much, and simply locked them inside their own solar system instead. Found this fascinating. She had never met a human. She did not expect she ever would. Then one day, a ship arrived with an unusual cargo. The captain was from House, a rival family that had always hated its mother. He smiled as he presented his gift to the forgotten princess. It was a cage, and inside the cage was a human male. "His name is Cole," the captain said. "He was a pilot in their military. We captured him 5 years ago. He has been a slave ever since. We thought the forgotten daughter of the Empress might enjoy some forgotten company." The insult was clear. Humans were considered barely intelligent by standards. Giving one to was like giving her an animal. The captain laughed as he left. Stood before the cage and looked at the human inside. He was smaller than her, with brown skin covered in scars. His hair was dark and cut short. His eyes were the color of earth after rain. He looked back at her without fear. "Are you going to kill me?" he asked. His voice was rough but calm. "No," said, "I do not kill." "Then what do you want from me?" She thought about this question. No one had ever asked what she wanted before. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have never wanted anything." She opened the cage and told him he could move freely on the station. He seemed surprised. He was even more surprised when she gave him food and a room of his own. "Why?" he asked. "Because you are a person," she said, "even if no one else thinks so." For the first few weeks, Cole kept his distance. He watched her. He studied the station. Knew he was looking for a way to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The nearest inhabited system was 10 years away at the speed their small ships could travel. Slowly something changed, began to talk to her. He told her about Earth, about blue skies and green forests and oceans so vast you could not see the other side. He told her about his family, all dead now in the war. He told her about flying through space, about the feeling of freedom that came with it. Told him about her life, about being born wrong, about being thrown away, about the years of silence and loneliness. Listened without judgment. Sometimes he even smiled at her. "You are not what I expected," he told her one evening. "I thought all were monsters." "Perhaps I am not really," she said. "Perhaps that is why they hate me." "They're lost," said. Then the raiders came. Pirates had found the station. They came in 3 ships, armed and hungry for whatever they could steal. The security drones activated, but they were old and few. The pirates destroyed them in minutes. Hid in her quarters, listening to the sounds of the attack. She heard screaming, though she did not know whose screams they were. She heard explosions and weapons fire. She waited for death. It did not come. Instead, after what felt like hours, her door opened. Cole stood there, covered in blood. Most of it was not his. In his hands he held a mining pick, its metal edge dark with gore. Behind him, the corridor was filled with bodies. Bodies. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Could not speak. She stared at him, at this small human who had just killed a dozen armed raiders with nothing but a tool meant for breaking rocks. "How?" she finally managed to ask. Looked at the bodies behind him. He swayed slightly and she saw that he was wounded. Cuts and burns covered his arms. One of his legs was bleeding badly. He should not have been standing. "They wanted to hurt you," he said simply. "I did not let them." "But why? I am nothing. I am no one. Why would you risk your life for me?" Cole smiled then. It was a tired smile, full of pain, but also something else, something warm. "Because you are just a kid," he said, "and someone has to look after you." Then he collapsed, caught him before he hit the ground. She dragged him to the medical bay and spent the whole night treating his wounds, learning as she went, refusing to let him die. He had protected her, now she would protect him. Something had changed on the forgotten station at the edge of space. Something had begun. Cole healed slowly. Humans did not have the advanced medicine of the and only had basic medical supplies. But day by day his wounds closed. The burns faded to scars. His leg grew strong again. During his recovery, they talked. They talked more than had ever talked in her entire life. Told her stories of Earth, of his childhood in a city called Detroit, of his mother who had worked in a factory and his father who had fixed old machines. He told her about joining the military, about learning to fly, about the day the ships appeared in the sky and everything changed. "We knew we could not win," he said one evening. They sat in the station's small observation room looking out at the stars. "Everyone knew. Our ships were nothing compared to yours. Our weapons were like toys, but we fought anyway." "Why?" asked. She had read about the war, but the records never explained this part. "If you knew you would lose, why not surrender?" Was quiet for a long moment. "Because some things matter more than winning," he said finally. "We were fighting for our homes, our families, our right to exist. Even if we lost, we had to try. That is what being human means. We do not give up. We cannot give up. It is not in our nature." Thought about this. They did not think this way. In her culture, you only fought battles you could win. Anything else was foolish. But sitting here with, she began to wonder if the way was truly wise or simply cold. As recovered, he began to move around the station more. He fixed things that had been broken for years. He improved the air recyclers and repaired the food processors. He even managed to make the hot water work properly, something had never experienced before. "You are good with machines," she observed. "My father taught me. He used to say that anything broken can be fixed if you care enough to try." Wondered if that was true. Could broken things really be fixed? Could broken people? Months passed. The station became a different place. It was still isolated, still forgotten, but it no longer felt like a prison, and developed a routine. They ate together. They worked together. They learned from each other. Taught things no had ever taught her. He taught her how to cook simple meals, something servants always did for nobility. He taught her how to play card games and how to tell jokes. He taught her about music, singing old Earth songs in his rough voice while he worked. But the most important things he taught her were not skills, they were ideas. He taught her about kindness without expectation. Among the every gift came with strings attached. Every favor demanded repayment, but helped her simply because he could, because it was right, because he wanted to. He taught her about loyalty that was earned, not demanded. Nobles expected obedience because of their rank, but respected for who she was, not for her title or her bloodline. He taught her that protecting others was a kind of strength. The saw power only in domination, in making others kneel, but showed her that standing between the helpless and harm took more courage than any conquest. "Your people think we are primitive," said one day. "They think we are weak because we are small and soft, because we do not have bioelectric fields or superior technology, but they are wrong." "What do you mean?" "Humans survived on Earth for thousands of years before we had any technology at all. We survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that killed almost everyone. Do you know why?" Shook her head. "Because we look after each other," said. "One human alone is weak, but humans together, humans protecting each other, there is nothing in the universe that can stop us." In return, taught about the galaxy. She showed him maps of the 3 galaxies that controlled. She explained the complex politics of the noble houses, the endless games of power and betrayal. She told him about the 100 species that served the Empire, each one conquered long ago, each one still hopping secretly for freedom. "The Empire looks strong," she said, "but it is built on fear. Every species hates they obey only because they are afraid if that fear ever breaks." "Empires built on fear always fall eventually," said. "History proves that." "History does not include many falls." "Then maybe it is time for a new chapter." 1 year after arrived, an inspection team came to the station. They were supposed to check the mining equipment, but everyone knew the real reason. Someone had reported that the forgotten princess was getting too comfortable with her human pet. The team leader was a tall male with a cruel face. He looked at with disgust. "This creature should be in a cage," he said, "or better yet disposed of. Humans are vermin. They should not be allowed to walk freely among their betters." He reached for, intending to grab him. Moved between them. "Do not touch him," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. The team leader laughed. "You dare give orders. You are nothing, a defect, a shame to your bloodline. You have no power here." "He is mine," said. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place she had not known existed. "Touch him and answer to me." The team leader stared at her. No one spoke, stood very still, watching. "You would protect a human?" the team leader asked. "You would stand against your own kind for this animal?" "Yes," said I would. Something shifted in the room. The team leader saw something in his eyes, something that made him step back. Perhaps he saw determination. Perhaps he saw that she would not move, would not bend, would die before she let them take. Perhaps he saw a glimpse of what she was becoming. The inspection team left without incident. They took their report back to the Empire, and in the cold halls of the Imperial Palace, people began to whisper about the forgotten princess who had found her voice at last. After they left, looked at with new eyes. "You did not have to do that," he said. "You could have let them take me. It would have been easier for you." "No," said. "It would not have been easier, it would have been wrong." She reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had ever touched him deliberately. His hand was warm and rough with work. "You taught me that protecting others is strength," she said. "Now I understand. I will not let anyone hurt you, Cole. You are my friend, my only friend, and friends protect each other." Smiled. It was the same tired, warm smile he had given her that first night, covered in blood and barely standing. "Then we protect each other," he said. "That is the human way." From that day forward, something was different between them. They were no longer a princess and her servant or a prisoner and her keeper. They were partners. They were family. And family, had taught her, was the strongest thing in the universe. The summons came on a cold morning when the stars outside the station seemed especially bright. A small ship arrived carrying a single passenger in the robes of an imperial messenger. He bowed stiffly to and presented a sealed document. The seal was gold and black, the colors of the Empress herself. "Princess," the messenger read aloud, "you are commanded to appear before the imperial court on the. You will answer for your actions and your choices. Failure to appear will be considered treason." The messenger left without another word, stood holding the document, her hands trembling slightly. "What does this mean?" asked. "It means my mother has noticed me at last," said. "The report from the inspection team must have reached her. A princess who protects a human instead of obeying her betters. A scandal too large to ignore." "What happens if you go?" "I do not know, maybe exile to somewhere even worse, maybe death. The do not tolerate embarrassment." "And if you do not go?" "Then they send ships to bring me by force, and they kill everyone in their path, looked at, including you." Was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. "Then we go." "You do not have to come. You could hide here. Take one of the mining shuttles and disappear into the asteroid field. They might not find you." "No," said, "we protect each other. You said that yourself. I am not leaving you to face this alone." Preparing for the journey took several days. They had only one ship capable of the trip, an old transport vessel that had been left at the station years ago, worked on the engines while gathered supplies. Neither of them spoke much about what waited for them at the end. When they finally launched, looked back at the station that had been her home for most of her life, she felt no sadness leaving it. The station had been her prison, had been her salvation. The journey to the would take 3 weeks through normal space, then several jumps through the gate network that connected the Empire. It was supposed to be safe travel. The Imperial routes were patrolled and protected. It was not safe. The first attack came 4 days into the journey. A small fighter appeared from behind an asteroid, weapons already firing. Threw the transport into a desperate turn, dodging the first volley. Watched the fighter's identification signal and recognized the markings of house, the same house that had sent to her as an insult. "They want to kill us before we reach the court," she said. "Then they should have sent more ships," replied. What happened next showed why humans had terrified them during the war. Their transport was slow and unarmed. The fighter was fast and deadly. By every measure, they should have died in the first minute. But had been a pilot, not just any pilot. He had survived 5 years of war against superior enemies. He had learned to fight in ships held together with tape and prayers, against opponents with technology centuries ahead. He flew the transport like it was part of his body. He used asteroids as shields. He forced the fighter into tight spaces where its speed became a weakness. And when the fighter made one mistake, flying too close while trying to line up a shot, rammed into it. The collision tore both ships apart. Somehow the transport held together, the fighter did not. Found bleeding from a cut on his forehead, still gripping the controls, still alive. "That was insane," she said. "That was flying," replied with a grin. They repaired the transport as best they could and continued. But word had spread. The forgotten princess was traveling to the with her human, and someone wanted them dead. The second attack came at a refueling station. 3 assassins in dark robes tried to board their ship while they slept. They did not expect the human to be awake, sitting in the dark with a weapon made from scrap metal. Killed all 3 before even woke up. "How did you know?" she asked, staring at the bodies. "I did not know," admitted, "but I suspected, so I watched." "You have not slept in 3 days. "I will sleep when you are safe." The third attack was the worst. A group of pirates paid by someone wealthy and powerful ambushed them just before a gate jump. Their ship was boarded, fought them in the corridors, in the cargo hold, in the engine room. He used knives and tools in his bare hands. He took wounds that should have killed him, poison that should have stopped his heart, and kept fighting. Watched from the bridge, listening to the sounds of combat, unable to help. She heard screaming, and it was not screaming. When it was over, came to her covered in blood and barely able to stand. Behind him, the ship was filled with dead pirates, 15 of them against one human. Hal whispered, sat down heavily, his chest heaving. Humans are not like other species, he said. When we fight for something we love, something we believe in, we become something more. They call it madness. We call it heart. You should be dead 10 times over. Probably, but you needed me alive, so I stayed alive. They made it through the final gate and into the system. By then, stories had spread throughout the Empire. People whispered about the human who could not be killed, who had slaughtered pirates and assassins like they were nothing, who guarded the forgotten princess with a fury that nothing could match. Some said he was a demon. Some said he was a weapon. Some said he was proof that the Empire had been wrong to let any human live. When their battered transport landed a crowd had gathered to watch. Nobles and servants, soldiers and civilians, all wanted to see the princess and her human. Stood at the ship's ramp and looked out at the world she had been born on, the world that had rejected her. She was afraid. She had never been to court. She did not know the customs or the politics. She did not know what her mother would say or do. Then she felt beside her. He was still wounded, still exhausted, but he stood straight and tall. He looked at the crowd without fear. "Ready?" he asked. "No," admitted. "That is okay. I am not ready either, but we go anyway together." Nodded, she took a deep breath and stepped forward. She walked into the heart of the Empire with her head held high and a human at her side. The crowd parted before them, staring at the strange pair, at the princess without power, and the alien who had killed armies to protect her. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. That was the human way. And now realized it was her way too. The Imperial was the largest enclosed space in the known universe. It could hold entire cities within its walls. The ceiling was so high that clouds sometimes formed inside, drifting lazily beneath crystalline chandeliers the size of starships. 1,000 noble houses had sent their representatives, and they filled the galleries like a sea of silk and metal. Had heard stories about this place all her life, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. The bioelectric fields of so many nobles filled the air with pressure. Most species could barely stand in such a presence. Ambassadors from weaker worlds had been known to faint or even die from the overwhelming force. Felt nothing. She never had. The defect that had made her an outcast now made her immune to the power that filled the room. Beside her walked steadily. The pressure affected humans differently. It was not pleasant for him, could tell from the tightness around his eyes, but he bore it without complaint. He had borne worse. At the far end of the room, on a throne of living crystal that pulsed with inner light, sat Empress, his mother, the most powerful being in 3 galaxies. She was beautiful and terrible, her blue skin glowing with an aura that all other in the room combined. Her eyes were gold and cold, and they fixed on as she approached. The walk seemed to last forever. Every step echoed in the vast space. Whispers followed them, nobles commenting on the forgotten princess and her pet, on the scandal she represented, on the possible outcomes of this judgment. Finally stood before the throne. She bowed, though every part of her wanted to stand tall. "Mother," she said. "Do not call me that." The Empress's voice was like ice cracking. "You lost the right to that word when you chose shame over duty." Said nothing, there was nothing to say. "You were meant to be forgotten," the Empress continued. "A quiet mistake, hidden away where your weakness could not embarrass our bloodline. But you could not even do that correctly. Instead, You have made yourself the subject of every whispered conversation in the Empire." She leaned forward on her throne, her golden eyes blazing. "You shame our bloodline, you bond with vermin. You refuse to die quietly as you were meant to. Tell me, daughter, what do you have to say for yourself?" The room fell silent. Every eye was on. She could feel the weight of expectation, the certainty of everyone present that she would beg for mercy, would grovel and apologize and promise to be better. She did not. "I have nothing to apologize for," said. Her voice was quiet but clear, carrying through the vast space. "You threw me away because I was different. You sent me to die alone in the dark. I survived. I found friendship. I found loyalty. I found things more valuable than any power you possess." Gasps echoed through the galleries. No one spoke to the Empress this way. No one dared. But did not strike her daughter down. Instead, something flickered in her golden eyes. Interest, perhaps, or curiosity. "Friendship," the Empress repeated, "with a human." "Yes. The same species we conquered. The same vermin who caused us more trouble than any other race in our history. You claim friendship with one of them." "I do." The Empress studied for the first time, truly looking at him. He met her gaze without flinching, felt a flash of pride. "I have read the reports," said slowly. "I have seen the recordings. This human has killed pirates and assassins. He has survived wounds that would kill our strongest warriors. He has protected you against impossible odds." "He has," agreed. "And yet he is only human, small, weak, without any special abilities or advanced technology." The Empress tilted her head. "Tell me, daughter, we stripped him of everything. We killed his people and imprisoned his world. Why does he fight for you?" He looked back at her with those earth-colored eyes, and he smiled slightly. "Because she is worth fighting for," said. His voice was rough and quiet, but in the silent room, everyone heard him clearly. "Because she showed me kindness when she had no reason to. Because she saw me as a person when everyone else saw vermin. I would die for her 1,000 times and consider myself lucky." More gasps. A human speaking unbidden before the Empress. Another scandal to add to the growing list. But did not seem angry. She seemed thoughtful. "I ask you one final question," the Empress said too, "and your answer will determine your fate." She rose from her throne, her aura expanding until it filled the entire room with crushing weight. "Who is your guardian, daughter? What great house protects one so weak? What power shields you from the consequences of your defiance?" This was the moment. Knew it. The Empress expected her to name some noble ally, some political faction that had been secretly supporting her. That was how the thought. Power came from connections, from houses and alliances. Looked at her mother, at the Empress of 3 galaxies, and spoke the truth. "My human." The court exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted in outrage. Some laughed in disbelief. Others simply stared, unable to process what they had heard. A princess claiming a human as her protector. The insult was beyond measure. But through it all, Empress remained still. She looked at, then back at. The chaos continued around them, but the 3 of them existed in a bubble of silence. Finally, the Empress raised her hand. Instantly, the room went quiet. "You claim this human as your guardian," said. "Very well, let him prove it." His heart froze. "Trial by combat," the Empress declared. "An ancient rite nearly forgotten but still valid under imperial law. Your guardian will face my champion. If he wins, you are both free. Your crimes will be forgiven, your status restored. You may live as you choose." "And if he loses?" asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then he dies, and you will watch. And then you will spend the rest of your life in the deepest prison we possess, knowing that your foolish attachment killed the only creature that ever cared for you." The room buzzed with excitement. A trial by combat. It had not happened in centuries, and the imperial champion was legendary, a monster bred for war, undefeated in 10,000 battles. Turn 2. You do not have to do this. We can refuse. We can run. Shook his head. Run where, hide how? He took her hands in his. This is our chance, maybe our only chance. I will fight. You could die. I could, agreed, but I will not. He smiled that warm, tired smile. I promise to protect you. I keep my promises. The Empress watched this exchange with unreadable eyes. Then she spoke again. The combat will take place tomorrow at dawn. The Empire will watch, and we will see once and for all what a human is truly worth. She turned and walked away, her attendants following. The court began to disperse, nobles already placing bets on how quickly the human would die. Stood in the emptying room, holding hands, feeling the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow, one human would fight for both their lives. And the galaxy would never be the same. The arena was ancient, built in the early days of the Empire for blood sport and public executions. It had not been used in centuries, but overnight it had been cleaned and prepared. Now it gleamed under the morning suns, its seats filled with spectators from across the Empire. Billions more watched through broadcast screens on 1,000 worlds. Sat in the royal viewing box, surrounded by guards. The Empress had placed her there deliberately, ensuring she would see everything. This was meant to be a lesson, a punishment. On the far side of the arena, a massive gate began to open. The crowd went silent. The Imperial champion emerged. It was one of the most feared creatures in the known universe. They had bred them for 1,000 years, engineering them into perfect killing machines. This one stood 12 feet tall, its body covered in natural armor thicker than starship plating. Its arms ended in claws that could tear through metal. Its eyes glowed with engineered rage. They had never lost a fight. It had killed warriors from 100 species. Entire planets had surrendered rather than face one in battle. Then the other gate opened. Cole walked onto the sand. He wore simple clothes and carried no weapon except a standard combat blade, barely a foot long. Compared to he looked like a child facing a monster. The crowd laughed, some him, most simply waited to see how quickly he would die. Did not laugh, she knew what others did not. She had seen fight, she knew what lived inside that small human frame. The Empress raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent. This is trial by combat, announced. The human Cole fights for the freedom of Princess. The Imperial champion fights for justice. There is no surrender, there is no mercy, only victory or death. She lowered her hand. The charged. It was fast, faster than anything that large had any right to be. It crossed half the arena in seconds, claws raised to tear in two. Did not run. He waited perfectly still until it was almost on top of him. Then he moved. The human dove under the first swing rolled, came up behind the monster. His blade flashed, cutting at the back of this leg. The armor there was thinnest. Blood sprayed. The roared and spun, but was already gone, circling, staying in motion. This was how he fought. Not strength against strength, but speed, positioning, patience. Finding weaknesses, exploiting them, wearing down an enemy over time. He attacked again and again. Each time somehow survived. He dodged, he rolled. He let attacks pass within inches of his body. He could not match the creature's power, so he did not try. Instead, he cut it 100 times. Small wounds, shallow wounds, but wounds that added up. Minutes passed, then an hour. The crowd grew restless, confused. The human should be dead. Why was he not dead? They began to slow. It was not designed for long battles. Its engineered rage demanded quick kills, overwhelming force, total destruction. Fighting an enemy who would not die, who could not be caught, who kept cutting and cutting and cutting, was not something it understood. But understood. This was the human way of war. You did not need to be stronger. You needed to endure. You needed to outlast. You needed to make every victory cost more than it was worth. 2 hours into the fight, there was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. It staggered. Its movements were clumsy. For the first time in its existence, it felt something like fear. Was hurt too. His arm was broken where the head finally caught him with a glancing blow. He had cuts across his chest and face. One of his eyes was swelling shut from blood, but he was still standing, still moving, still fighting. How, the Empress whispered, heard her, though she did not think she was supposed to. Because he refuses to lose, said. Because humans do not know how to quit. You conquered their world, killed their families, took everything from them, and still they fought. Still they refused. That is what you could never understand. That is what you should have feared. The made one final charge, putting everything it had left into one desperate attack. If it landed, would die. There would be no dodging, no escaping. Did not dodge. He ran toward the monster. The crowd gasped, even stopped breathing. At the last moment, dropped and slid across the sand, passing under the claws. As he slid, his blade came up, driving deep into the monster's belly where the armor was weakest. He used his momentum, his weight, every bit of strength he had left. The blade went in up to the handle. The stopped. It looked down at the human clinging to its stomach, at the blade buried in its chest, at the blood pouring onto the sand. Then it fell. The arena was silent. No one moved, no one spoke. Pulled himself free from the fallen monster and stood, swaying, covered in blood both his and this. He looked up at the royal box where sat. And he smiled. The crowd erupted, not in anger but in something else. Awe, respect, perhaps even fear. They had watched a human, a creature they considered barely intelligent, defeat the most dangerous warrior their empire had ever created. Everything they believed had been proven wrong. The Empress rose slowly. The arena fell silent again. "The trial is concluded," she said. Her voice was strange, carrying emotions had never heard from her before. "The human is victorious. Princess is free." Was already running. She burst past the guards, out of the box, down to the arena floor. She reached just as his legs gave out and caught him before he could fall. "You did it," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You actually did it." "Told you I would," whispered. His voice was weak, but his smile was as warm as ever. "Keep my promises." Behind them, the Empress had descended from her box. She walked across the bloody sand until she stood before them. "I underestimated you," said Tu. "I underestimated all of your kind." Looked up at her through his one good eye. "Everyone does. That is what makes us dangerous." The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then she did something no one expected. She bowed her head, just slightly. A gesture of acknowledgement from the ruler of 3 galaxies to a former slave. "Perhaps we were wrong about humans," she said. "Perhaps we have been wrong about many things." She turned to, "You have earned your freedom, daughter, more than that. You have shown the Empire something it needed to see. Strength is not always in power. Sometimes it is in loyalty, in love, in refusing to surrender." She paused. "I am not good at admitting mistakes, but sending you away was a mistake. You have become something remarkable, something new." "I had help," said, holding close. "Yes, you did." The Empress looked at the human in her daughter's arms. "Take care of her, Cole. You have proven you are worthy of the task." "I will," said, "always." The Empress turned and walked away, and understood that something had changed not just for her, but for the entire empire. In the years that followed, built a new kind of house, one that did not rule through domination but through loyalty, one that protected the weak and welcomed the outcasts. Other species began to request human guardians of their own. The quarantine on Earth was lifted. Humanity spread through the galaxy, not as conquerors but as protectors. And always at side stood Cole, her guardian, her family, her human. She had been born without power, thrown away as worthless, but she had found something better than power. She had found love, and love, she learned, was stronger than any empire. That was the human way. And now it was her way too. Forever,